The Bengals 2024 season is set to begin, and it's time to preview all things Bengals with left tackle Orlando Brown Jr. Hi again, everyone. I'm James Rapien. This is Cincinnati Bengals Talk, and I'm joined by Orlando Brown Jr. right now. Orlando, I appreciate the time. I know you're doing well, and here's how I know you're always doing well because you're always smiling. It's something I notice about you right away. You're smiling from ear to ear all the time.
Yeah, I'm doing great, man. I try to be positive. So it's football time. I'm ready for the season.
Yeah, I think the one thing that stood out to me all offseason, or at least this offseason, when I think about you and I think about year two of Orlando Brown Jr. in Cincinnati, is something you said to me probably in May. It was during the offseason program. And I asked you about your offseason, and you said how big of a relief it was to be in Cincinnati, to know you're going to be here. You stayed in town. It's not like you went and you trained elsewhere. You wanted to stay here. You trained at the facility. You were with Joe, who was rehabbing the wrist, obviously. Now that we're just a few days away from the regular season, how valuable do you think that was to stay in Cincinnati, to know where your present and future is, and to be able to work on your game here?
Yeah, it was extremely valuable for so many different reasons, man. Just for myself personally, being able to stay in that state of mind that it takes to be a football player. I feel like, man, just not really taking time off for training elsewhere, going into the same facility, having the same routine, driving the same drive to work every single day throughout this whole year. It creates a sense of normalcy for me. And as you mentioned, as I had mentioned to you in May, man, this is the first time in my career where I've been somewhere and I'm going to be here. You know what I mean? I'm under contract for another three seasons. I'm here and I'm comfortable here and I have a nice home here. So I enjoy all of those things. And then being able to talk to the free agents when they come in town, being able to
Yeah.
when Trent Brown is walking through the weight room on his way upstairs to meet with coaches in front office, I'm able to stop and chat with him. You know what I mean? When Amarius Mims is in for his top 30 visit, I'm able to brush shoulders with him as he's heading upstairs coming from the weight room, which was nice. So man, I really enjoyed it. Just being able to be here in the facility, to be around our strength staff every single day all year, it's been great.
When you add two guys like that, or the team you're on adds two guys like those two, Trent Brown, been there, done that, 10-year
Yep.
vet. And then it's the other end of the spectrum, a guy that had, I think, 8 career starts, but you can see the talent right away. I mean, one look at Amarius and it's like, oh, well, that dude's different.
Oh,
And I'm sure one look on the field, you feel that way too.
Mhm.
Let's start with Amarius. What were your first impressions of him? You don't know the Bengals are going to draft him. You brushed shoulders with him. You didn't have to lean down. Normally, to brush shoulders with me, you'd have to sit in a chair. With Amarius, you, you don't have to sit in a chair. He's your
Yeah.
height. So what was that like?
Yeah, no, it was awesome, man. It was important for me to be there that day. When we drafted him and he came in for his presser and everything. Because it was important for me not to only meet him, meet his family. I knew that his mom and dad were gonna be there and I wanted to make sure that I was able to greet them and meet them. And that day, one of the first times I met him, it was actually the day I was recording a video, filming a bunch of our staff upstairs on a mini mic, asking a bunch of silly questions. And so it just so happened to be that day that I met him and everything, man, which was pretty funny.
The thing I think is interesting about you is I think you love interviews. You enjoy talking to people. You also enjoy interviewing people. And yet at the same time, you want to play football forever. It feels like
Yeah, it
is that
does.
fair? It's not like you're thinking about that next phase, even though you'll be awesome in it.
Yeah.
You're hoping to play for as long as you can, even though you are on the mini mic, and that has been an Orlando Brown Jr. staple for a few years.
It has. For me, man, it's just as you said, I love the game of football. I'm gonna do this as long as I can. And the mini mic is just an opportunity for my our fans, even other teammates that are on social media or coaches, people in the outside world to know the personalities in the locker room. And it's a simple, easy way for me to help someone understand who Jermaine Pratt is and know that in some way they can relate to him. So that's kind of why I do it, man. It's fun, it's entertaining, and people get to know these guys in a different way.
going back to Amarius, he obviously suffered the pectoral injury, but before that, I mean, that Tampa Bay game, I was
Yeah.
like, "Oh, that dude." Like, and afterwards, he's like, "Oh, well, I made a bunch of mistakes and all those things." I'm like, "Phew, man, I don't know, man. I've seen right tackles here, and I'm not naming
Yeah.
names, but like he looked
Yeah.
pretty darn good." And I know he's going up against backups in his preseason, but how impressed were you with him? How much has he grown over the past few months, do you think?
Oh, a lot, man. Even from his first day out there in OTAs, I feel like, man, he was good. You know, I mean, it's obviously still a ton of question marks because it's still, you can tell he's thinking about he's thinking about a lot of things, a lot of his movements, and man, kind of once the helmets came on, it was a live body in front of him. He was able to just go out there and play. And the advice that Trent gave him, the advice that I've given him, is just play big and do what got you here, and everything else will take care of itself as long as you're paying attention to detail and all those different things. And so, man, he's a hard worker. He's extremely humble. He's got a great understanding of his pros and cons as a player. And man, I mean, his focus on the day to day, the energy he brings in is infectious. I feel like we just knew right away. His talent and ability and what he's going to be in this league. And, as you saw some of the, smaller stuff in this preseason game against Tampa, he obviously went out there and did a great job as a young player, but there's still so much room to grow, and he will.
I think, and you mentioned Trent helping with Amarius as
Mhm.
well, and I think because he's almost the opposite of you in some ways. He's not a big talker. I
Yeah.
think that's fair to say. He's quiet.
He is.
He's not gonna be rolling around with a mini mic asking people questions.
He's not.
That's not his personality, which is obviously fine. He's here to block people.
Yeah.
And when when he missed practice early on, and then Amarius goes down, Trent's coming back, and I think outside looking in, some Bengals fans are like, "All right, well, what is this veteran guy? What is he about?"
Yeah.
So I, I'll ask you, and I know it's a fair question for him, but you've been around him.
Yeah.
So how would you describe him? What you've seen from him in the locker room? How he carries himself, handles his business?
Yeah, no, man. I mean, he's an incredible pro. Honestly, he's been beneficial for me. Obviously, just being able to have conversation about fundamentals, different players, his style of play. Because man, he's a freak athlete. We're talking like Shaquille O'Neal, freak athlete. You know what I mean in terms of per pound ability. Some of the movements, natural movements, and things he can do with his body, feet, balance, strength is insane. And I've been able to learn a lot from him in ways that he crafted his game, things that he's learned within the game, especially in pass protection, that have been beneficial for him on his thought process on certain things. Man, Trent's been awesome, and I know he doesn't talk much to the media, and I know he's kind of quiet, but man, he's one of the funniest guys on the team. You get him to open his mouth, so
Is he really? He's
he
fun.
is.
Okay, okay.
He's a funny individual, man.
Okay, so is he like the sneaky he's the sneaky funny guy, right? He's got
Yeah,
one-liners? Are they one-liners or
he's just a quality teammate, man. And he's hilarious. He's got some one-liners in there. He's got some funny facial expressions in there. You wouldn't believe it, but yeah, I guess I'm fortunate to get to see that side of him.
Yeah, I love that. I love hearing that because full disclosure, and it's fine. I would say otherwise, and there are times I obviously have to be critical, but people see that he's not out there,
Yeah.
and they instantly say, "Oh, well, he's a distraction, or he's this, or he's that." And I'm like, guys, that's not the case. Like
No,
I'm in
not
there
at
all
all.
the time. He's not. No one's talking
Yeah.
about it. No one's concerned. People
Yeah.
just want him to go out there and be able to protect nine when week one is, against the Patriots and against the
Yeah.
Commanders and against I skipped the Chiefs, but against
Yeah.
the Chiefs. Like that's what they want. So I think with someone like that, especially because he does have somewhat of an injury history, and I'm not expecting you to
Mhm.
know that, but are the views of a veteran like that, like, hey, just find a way to get him to week one, Zach, whatever you need to do. Is like that the benefit of
Yeah.
having a player's first coach almost?
Yeah, yeah. I feel like in a way you're saying this, he's 31 years old. I think this is year 10 for him. I
Yeah.
mean, he's been doing it. He's been doing it at a high level. He's been a tremendous player for X amount of years. He's done it against a ton of great players as well. So, and he just put it on film last year. And so, man, I feel like it's just the understanding that where he is in his career, what he's done already, we have an idea. And when he's out there, we've seen it. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? When he's been in team drills, when he's an individual, when he's going against somebody in one on ones, we've seen it.
Yeah, I think that that makes a ton of sense. Also, are you calling him old at 31? Because I'm older than him, and I would be offended. I'm just
I'm not calling him old. I'm not because I'm 28, man. I'll be 31 in 3 years. So
that's right.
I'm
I
not
was
calling
trying
him
to
old.
catch you. I was trying to catch you so in 3 years I could pull the tape and be like,
Yeah.
Orlando. Uh,
Oh, stop, man.
what uh what have you and I've talked to you this offseason. I mentioned it at the top of the interview, but Joe Burrow, you
Yep.
saw him go through this process, this wrist process where and you literally stayed in Cincinnati, so I'm sure you felt it. Where literally every single day people are thinking and asking and wondering about number nine's wrist and how it's doing, how it's healing, all of those things. I'm sure he's obviously sick of answering questions about it, and I would be too. But I'm sure you're tired of talking about it. And I'm not going to ask you about his health. I'm curious about what you saw from him, the player, the person, how he battled this literally unprecedented for a NFL quarterback injury that he dealt with, and obviously has overcame it enough to start against the Patriots.
Yeah. Man, it's I think, in life I feel like we all have turning points, I guess, or every story has a turning point. And uh it turns in, I guess, a good direction or a bad direction. And I feel like this is one of those turning points in his life, man, that are going to have a ton of positive reactions and positive that come from this because of the time that he had to spend away from the game. uh Man, it's hard obviously not being out there, especially when you're Joe Burrow. You know what I mean? This is the Cincinnati Bengals. That is our leader, that is our starting quarterback, who's one of the best in the league and best in the world at what he does. And so I imagine it's incredibly somewhat humbling and a little frustrating as well to kind of go through what he went through. And I feel like he had time obviously to reflect on things. And man, I just, the intensity and focus that I've seen on a daily from him, his approach from the moment he got hurt till now. I mean, he's ready and he's been ready. And man, his he's I don't want to put into words too much because I don't want to spoil it for you guys, but uh man, the Joe Burrow I feel like people are going to see this year is a different Joe Burrow than people have seen in the past, in a better way.
Really, I
Yep.
think the one thing that stood out to me in practice, I'm going to surprise you with something about Joe that, at least as of our conversation, I wonder if you've seen it yet or not, and you might have. But before I do that, the one thing in practice, he had to scramble a few times,
Hmm.
and he does look explosive. I'll say that. Like I think he clearly worked on his lower body explosion, probably because he was like a caged lion that couldn't work out with that right hand, that right wrist for part of the off season. But yeah, to me, the explosion clearly he's thicker, but
Yep.
the explosion is still there and maybe better than ever.
Yeah, yeah. No, I seen the same thing on a few of those scrambles. I remember one of them in training camp. It was a move the ball drill, and he takes off to his left. I tried to sprint with him, and I might have had 6 or 7 yards on him. He blew right past me, so it was like play 9 of the drive. But I guess that's might not be saying too much, but I definitely feel like he's more explosive this year.
Have you seen the magazine that he's on? Just yes or no, without saying the magazine.
No.
Okay. This is perfect. So this I saw this today and I'm about to share my screen so you can see it. So your reaction
Oh
to
man.
Joe Burrow on the cover of Men's Health.
Okay, Shiesty.
How about that?
Let's go to work, Shiesty. Do your thing. They got him. They got
Ooh.
him pre. They got him pre haircut too, man.
There was another one of him. There it is.
Oh, good for him, man.
There's
Good
the
for
other
him.
one during that body armor shoot. And
Good
he's
for
one
him.
of 3 guys on Men's Health there. So
Good for
something
him,
I
man.
something I had to show you. Did you you think he worked out enough to get the Men's Health seal of approval? Because
Hey,
that's a pretty cool honor.
Yeah, man, he's got the guns out as well. So more power to Shiesty on that for where the cutoffs.
Yeah, I know, right? I mean, he was like, "I put on some weight. Here we go. Let's do."
Yeah. That's great.
Um, have you? What one magazine would you want to be on the cover of? Is there one
Oh,
that you would like? Oh
man.
man, I made it.
Uh, you know, I've done a Sports Illustrated shoot. I've never been on
Mhm,
the cover of like the official paper.
mhm.
Um, I feel like that's probably the most iconic
Yeah,
thing you could see. I remember when I was in high school and the Dominican Sue was on an ESPN magazine and or a Nike magazine,
mm,
and it literally said "too big to fail." I always thought that was pretty cool.
that's
So
very cool. Yeah. Yeah, I wish we grew up in the era, even though I am older than you and you pointed that out. We grew up in the era of magazines where, Sports Illustrated, you're on the SI cover. And Burrow was, by the way, a couple years ago
Oh
to
wow.
start I think it was the 2022 season preview.
Okay.
Ted did the shoot with him, and then they didn't use Ted.
That's rough, man. That's
he,
rough. That's
he was in the
rough.
spread inside, but on the cover, I believe it was
Yeah.
just Joe. I believe I have to check to make sure. I'm no, actually, I know it was because Joe was just, looking all
That's great.
Joe like on the cover. So you can
That's
razz
great.
Ted a little bit about that one.
Oh
Uh,
man.
what's the potential of this offensive line room, Orlando? Getting back to football, how
Yeah.
good can you guys be? Because I look at the room now and I see a Matt Lee. Like we know about the veterans, and everyone watching, I'm sure, knows them. You had Trent Brown, Amarius Mims. We talked about him. Your good friend Cody Ford. So Mims is the new guy in Trent, and then a couple young guys emerge: Jackson
Yeah.
Kirkland, Matt Lee. Now we're talking about 9 guys here
Yeah.
that impressed in camp preseason, and it feels deeper than it's been. How good can this offensive line room be this year?
Yeah, really good, and I feel like, man, obviously ownership and the front office recognize that by keeping these young men in Jackson Kirkland, Matt Lee, um, I know Cody, and obviously Amarius are our other 4, and so or other 3, but I feel like, man, the depth of what we have is really good, and we have high quality depth, which is so important at the offensive line position. Just because man, a guy may need to come out for a series, a guy may have to come out for a quarter or a half, or I think about myself last year getting hurt with the groin and then trying to play through it, and man, fourth quarter rolls around in Seattle, I'm not able to finish the game, and Cody's able to go in there and do a pretty good job, and so. Uh, Man, all of these guys will be active, I imagine, at some point, and they've all earned their way, man. Obviously Jackson Kirkland's had a really tough road, you could say. I believe last year being undrafted. I think he got put on IR at one point in time last year or something like that for his wrist. So, he's had a long road, but he's worked his tail off, man, to really get in this position and have this kind of opportunity. And so he put it all on film. He left it all out there. Has been all off season, and this is the game of football, man. You can't hide. What you get in is what you put in is what you get out. And so, there's no stripes from pretending in this business. And he's earned it. He earned his right. And Matt Lee is obviously a young center, a young ascendant center who's got all the capability, who's got the proper mindset. And man, all of these dudes, all 3 of these guys, I'll include Mims in this conversation, Jackson and Matt. These are 3 younger players that don't give a F is the way that I would put it, man. You gotta have that ability to have the confidence in yourself to not give a F and go out there no matter how good or bad to continue to move forward, be humble enough to understand how you can better yourself, and all of them do that.
Yeah, I look at that room and I just think, man, young, athletic. And by that room, I'm like the backups.
Oh, for
Like if
sure.
if you got to call on one of those guys,
Hmm.
a couple years ago against you were on the Chiefs. There's 3 starters out.
Yep.
So Joe wants to throw it all over. Like that's your offense. Like I get it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You guys are going to throw the ball a ton.
Hmm.
Well, you need to be 8 deep, not
You do.
not not 5 or 6. And so I do
Hmm.
feel like that's trending in the right direction. What is anything different? Does anything feel different going into this year, team wise? And this is a very general question, but I just mean vibes wise versus last year. That the reason I ask this, I don't see a ping pong table in the locker room.
Yeah.
And that's the popular, "Oh, they're more serious" thing, but I don't think you guys needed to necessarily be more serious. But are
Mhm.
the vibes different at all than they
Yeah.
were a year ago?
Yeah, they are, man. I feel like when you think of a winning culture, it obviously starts up top with ownership and trickles on down to us as players. And so I feel like the urgency in the building is different. And I wasn't here obviously prior to last year, so I can't really speak on what things were like the Super Bowl year or the AFC Championship year or Burrow's rookie year. I can't really speak on those things, but I imagine the sense of urgency now is even different than it was then. And when you have that sense of urgency, it creates intensity. It creates a different level of focus and attention to detail. And so, man, I feel like uh, Zach, his staff, everything that they did to script training camp and OTAs, the way that they did, challenging us every single time we were out there on the field with our helmets on, some way, shape, form, or fashion, creating uh, creating those intense moments for us to be accountable to one another, to hold ourselves accountable, you know what I mean, as individuals. uh all of those things I feel like have created this vibe of urgency, you know what I mean, and I feel like it's going to be able to show up for us big time, especially early on here to start the season.
Last thing for me, potentially. I never wanna
Mhm.
for sure say last thing because then I might have 2 more questions for you, and I'm gonna make you beat me up because I'm wasting all
Yeah.
your time right now.
No,
But,
I'm chilling, man. Lucky day for you, I'm chilling.
that's right. Lucky day for me is right. I will take advantage of it. No, I think, I will not. But I will use a little bit of your time here. I wanna ask you about Jamar
Yeah.
because you describe all of those things, urgency, and it got a little weird during camp, and maybe not for the players, but certainly for fans and the contract stuff. And when a player of Jamar's status, who obviously is one of the best receivers in the game, hasn't talked publicly, but is still showing up to practice, still going in meetings, how unique of a situation is that? I'm not sure you've probably been in that situation much, maybe a time or two during your career, but how unique is that? And how has this locker room not let that? Because I know it hasn't. But how have you guys not let that get in the way of that focus, of that sense of urgency you were just describing?
Yeah, it's like it's like going to war or practicing for war without the RPG. Like that like we have one of the best, most talented offensive players in the world,
Mhm.
and he's just in a cage right now. You know what I mean? Like we understand that like when Uno chases out there, it changes the whole dynamic of a football game. And so, man, it's the understanding that business is business, how he handles it, what he's dealing with, that is his business, man, and his agent's business. So I feel like as players, as a peer, we understand that. I've never once judged him or felt any kind of way about what he's doing, man. It's part of the business. It's part of what him and his team feel like is best, and man, we respect that as players. But as I said, we know that when Jamar gets out there, it's game over. It's game over, man. We talking about one of the most dominant football players in the world.
Where does that come from? Because
Yeah,
there have definitely been times in Bengals history where I promise you that would have been a distraction. I
yeah,
remember the days of Akili Smith coming into
yeah,
training camp with a boom box after holding out for 40 days, and that was when rookie
yeah,
contracts weren't set and
yeah,
they weren't slotted like they are now. But, like, I go back a ways,
yeah,
and there have been distractions. Andre Smith holding out for a long time just to get into the
yeah,
offensive line room,
yeah.
and Mike Brown literally on camera saying, "Hey, you're gonna have to get in shape," as he comes in. Just like real
Yeah,
stuff that happens. Like,
yeah,
in it clearly was a distraction. Why does this team? Because it isn't just this year. You weren't here for
yeah,
Jesse, but the Jesse thing
yeah,
wasn't a distraction. T obviously has
yeah,
had some of his thing. It wasn't a distraction. Like, where does that start? How does that trickle down to everyone? Because I do think that it just gets
yeah.
absorbed in and it isn't a distraction.
Yeah, honestly, I'm just gonna credit the players as individuals, and it's the understanding that like, man, Trey Henderson holding out or requesting a trade, and him not showing up or whatever. Trey's one of the hardest workers in the building. You know what I mean? T. Higgins, one of the hardest workers in the building. Um, Jamar Chase, the hardest worker I've ever seen. You know what I mean? Next to Tyreek Hill, just in terms of his approach to practice on the daily. So there is no fear that these guys are going to show up and not produce or not be themselves, because this is what they do. They all love the game. They all have a ton of focus for the game. There's just business sides of things that obviously get involved, but Jamar is a hard worker, man. So we know that when the lights come on, he's going to be right there ready to shine.
He is Orlando Brown Jr., Bengals star left tackle. Orlando, I always appreciate the time. I'm sure you have plenty of mini mics scheduled. I know our fans are really looking forward to you protecting Joe's blind side, starting with the Patriots this Sunday.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited to get out there, man. I can't wait to do it for the city of Cincinnati. Let's get to New Orleans in February, but we got to take it one week at a time.
Oh, I think people like the sound of that. Orlando, I really appreciate the time and thanks for coming on.
Appreciate you having me on.